Okay, let's give this another test fit before we proceed, just to make sure we're still good so far. This side actually needs to go up a little bit, and the interference is the thickness of the weld bead there. So I'm going to have to take the grinder, take some material off of there so that I can get this to almost kind of twist just a little bit, but it's not much. It's about a 1/16 of an inch. So I can live with that. That's not a problem. So let me go do that, and then we will set up and cut out this big hole here for the electric fan. So now I'm going to come in here and we're going to cut out this big circle so we can put our fan in place. First thing we need to do is just pop a little starter hole. Really anywhere in here closer to the line is good, but you don't have to get right up to the line. So I got the hole cut out, I dressed it with the file and then with the DA sander, and I kind of went over the whole thing with the DA sander, but I only had the one sanding pad that was on the sander and it's pretty worn out. So I'm gonna have to go to the store and buy some more, because I think I would like to give this shroud a bit of a brushed look to it, and then maybe spray it with some high temp clear coat. So let's put the fan on there. Let's see how well that hole is. Alright, those line up. Those holes line up. So good. There's about a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch of a lip, basically aluminum inside that shroud, and it's nowhere near touching the fan. It wouldn't touch the fan. The blade is actually recessed above the aluminum, but all the way around we got a nice, tight, flat surface, a good seal. You know, I was a little worried about this thing kind of warping, and as I mentioned before, that's why I waited until now to cut the hole out, because this space right here is so narrow. I was worried that it would get all warpy. So good. We're just about finished up. Basically, we need to pop some holes. We need to make some mounting holes for the shroud to the radiator, and get some hardware for those mounts, get some hardware for here, and we're just about done. So I've gone in, I've measured this out, I've made some little marks here. Basically, I went 26 inches from each side. That brings the mounting hole in about a 1/2 inch from either side of this little flange under here that's on the radiator. So divided that by 5, or really by 4, which basically puts all my holes at about 6.5 inches apart. So we'll have 5 holes, mounting it to the bottom, 5 holes to the top, and we're going to use some small machine screws like a number 8 or a number 10 little machine screws. That should be plenty of hardware to hold the shroud to the radiator. So I got a little 1/16 inch drill bit here. We'll go ahead and make a little pilot hole, drill those out a little bit bigger, big enough to fit the screws, and then we'll have it mounted. And there we go. Got all 10 holes drilled, 5 on top, 5 on bottom. I just need to run to the store, pick up some hardware, and we're about ready to have this thing mounted back in the truck. Okay, we're ready to start reassembly here, and there's a couple things that we got to do first. One thing I want to mention, this flange here, this side flange, it was off camera, but I cut this down a little bit so that it was just below this flange here. So it's about 1/8 of an inch lower right here than it is here. The reason I did that is I didn't want the aluminum rubbing on the aluminum core of the radiator, particularly the tubes in the radiator. Now, it's, both are soft materials, but still, aluminum on aluminum is going to wear. Now, if this was made of steel and it was rubbing on those aluminum tubes, we could develop a leak even sooner. If it's probably going to move around just a little bit. So, this edge here is about 1/8 inch lower than this flange right there. What I'm going to do, I went to the store and I bought some fuel hose, some small diameter, 3/16 inch diameter fuel hose. What I've already done, I've cut one piece to length and I have split it. Just made one cut in there, the whole length of the tube. This is going to slide over this edge here and just cover this whole edge. So it's going to give us a soft surface that's going to press against the radiator core itself. It's also going to make a little bit of a gasket. This flange here, this flange surface and the flange surface on the radiator actually makes a pretty tight seal. So I'm not worried about that. And it doesn't have to be super 100% airtight. As long as the vast majority of the air is being drawn through the radiator core, you're good to go. So I've got this cut. I picked up a small tube of RTV silicone gasket maker. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to put a little bead all the way in there so that this is effectively glued in place. So this piece is cut. I'm going to glue it in, cut my other piece, do it on the other side, and then next we should probably be able to mount our electric fan. Well, next step is to put the fan in place. So go ahead and set that down on there. Put the last two little retainers on there. All of the hardware that I picked up to mount both the fan and the shroud to the radiator is number 10 panhead screws, machine screws. So I got washers and little star lock washers and all that kind of stuff. So we're just going to put a little bit of blue Loctite, the removable kind, on all of our fasteners. Oops. Then you put a washer on that. Okay. Cap that off, and then we're just gonna put nuts and star washers and all that kind of stuff underneath. Okay, ready to mount it to the radiator. So we'll just do like we did with the fan and start putting fasteners in place. all finished. Firmly bolted in place, both top and bottom. So we're ready to go put this back in the truck. So I've got the radiator reinstalled in the truck, and now I'm just going through the process of hooking the hoses back up and things like that. Now off camera, I had to raise up my radiator. I just had to lift it up, and I ended up lifting it up 1.5 inches. What the problem I think I was facing was that my filler cap was at the level or near the level of the water neck. So I was worried that I might have an air pocket either in the hose, because the hose comes up just a little bit. So either in the hose or in the top of the radiator core itself. So I've lifted up the radiator 1.5 inches. I whipped up these temporary, very, very temporary radiator support mounts. They're just held in place with some self-tapping sheet metal screws. This will all get remade. But for the purpose of this video, the radiators with the shrouds reinstalled, and it's a really, really good day to test out a cooling system. We're showing 106 degrees in Dallas right now, 5:30 p.m. So I'm gonna get the hoses hooked up. We'll put the coolant back in it. I got 1 bottle of fresh coolant, and then I got the old coolant that I took out, and we'll fire it up and see if this shroud helps this thing cool down a little better. So if the coolant you removed has been sitting out for a couple days, even in your garage, it can often pick up some crud, because I have an open container. It's not a sealed catch can like for draining motor oil. Mine's an open top container. These little filters, I bought these for doing the paint job on this truck. And you get them at Harbor Freight, and there's like 100 of them in a box, and a box is like $4.99. So I'm just going to use these little paint strainers to filter out any crud that's in my coolant that I took out earlier. There's definitely crud in there. Let me show you. There's quite a bit of trash in that coolant. So, good way to filter out your coolant when you're putting it back in the truck. And just for shits and grins, I thought I'd try out some of this Royal Purple-Ice Cooling System Optimizer and Conditioner. Run up to 22 degrees Fahrenheit cooler. It's going to be hard for me to test that or verify that. But I was at the parts store and saw it and figured this cooling system could use all the help it can get. So I'll just put a bottle of this in there, and then put our new bottle of coolant and some water, and be ready to start the truck. So with the fan running, there's one last thing we need to check, and that's how well the fan and the shroud is pulling air from the entire core. So I'm just going to use some $1 bills and let the fan suck them against the core and see how well it's working. We're going to start over on the driver's side where the fan is more located towards that side. Alright. Right here in the middle. Doesn't want to stick over here on this side. Let's see how far over before it starts to stick. Alright, sticking there. Oh. Down there, yep. So we're not pulling, we're not drawing, at least not enough air to hold the dollar bills to the core itself. over here on this side, but they're drawing real tight over on the passenger side in the center, and I moved those dollar bills over until they actually started to stick to the vacuum. The draw of the fan actually holds them to the core. So that's pretty good. That's, you know, I'm happy with that. That works for me. So let's wrap this video up. Alright, so let's wrap this video up because I'm hot and tired. It was 106 degrees out here today, and I'm cooked. So, to sum it up, the fan shroud was well worth it. Very easy to build, and I'm quite happy with my welds. I don't have a lot of practice TIG welding aluminum, and the welds that I laid down here on this fan shroud were some of the best I've ever done. So I'm excited to have some more aluminum projects. So earlier today, before I started working on the truck, I went to my metal store and picked up some more drop. Other stores will call it rim, like remainder, stuff like that. They call it drop. It's not scrap. They're not going to melt it down. It's just cut pieces from somebody else's order. You know, somebody only wanted, instead of a full 4x10, they wanted a 4x8, so there's 2 feet cut off. So that's what this stuff is. This is 1/8 inch. This is going to be used to fabricate a new mount at the very top of the radiator. So that's going to hold that down, and I'm pretty excited to get started working on that. Again, I want to, you know, start laying some more beads on aluminum. So, but you know, the welds that I did do, it's certainly not weld porn. It's not the best welding that you've ever seen or that I've ever seen, but I'm happy with it. So the thermo switch for the electric fan, I think, is malfunctioning. It turns on at 205 degrees like it's supposed to. This one is set to go off at 185, and it goes off about 190, 195. So I think this switch is malfunctioning. I've had problems with these thermo switches before, these Summit Racing house brand switches. So that's something we're going to address. Probably make a little quickie video swapping that out. And I'll probably go with a different manufacturer for the thermo switch, and probably a little bit cooler range, something that turns on at 185, 190 and turns off at 170, 175. And I may run two separate thermo switches, one for the hotter months, one for the cooler months. So that's about it. It was well worth it. Like you saw with the dollar bill test, I'm not drawing from, well, I probably am drawing more air from the entire core. However, what air that was being drawn over here on the passenger side was not enough to hold the dollar bills to the radiator. But nonetheless, I'm sure I can feel it. If I stick my hand up there, I can feel the air being drawn through. So, and it's definitely working. When the truck gets up to operating temperature, the fan turns on and it holds it at that temperature, which is important to me. If I was, you know, that's an idle test. If I was cruising down the road, I'm sure that temperature would drop as the engine RPM speeds up, the water pump speeds up, flowing that coolant through there, and not to mention the extra airflow going through the radiator. So that's it for this video. I appreciate y'all watching, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe.